I'm really interested in knowing why the U.S. Armed Forces is taking an interest, and why so much an interest that you're actually spending time and resources, as the way I see it, to move this industry forward. Why is this?
But let me pull the thread a little bit more of that. So really for the U.S. Armed Forces, and especially the Air Force, geologic hydrogen could be a real game changer. This isn't just about adding another fuel to the mix. It's about...
Welcome back to the Natural Hydrogen Investment Podcast, where we teach you more about the opportunities in this evolving industry. As always, I'm Anthony, natural hydrogen enthusiast and chemical engineer.
And I'm Morten Stahl, specialized investor and founder of Natural Hydrogen Ventures.
We want to remind you that you can go to our website, nath2investing.com, to get the latest in natural hydrogen updates. You can also check out our Natural Hydrogen Investor Report 2025 and sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and of course, share it with your friends. I want to tell you that today we have a special episode. I know I've said this before, but this one is extra special. The Natural Hydrogen Investment Podcast has a strong interest in shining a spotlight on both the commercial and scientific sides of the industry, allowing those inside and outside the space to understand the science behind natural hydrogen, as well as the general vision and more specific goals that are forming as the space evolves. However, it is just as crucial to comprehend today the real-world use cases of natural hydrogen once we've overcome the initial challenges, and the drivers and influences that will help this development take place. Today, we have a truly valuable guest when it comes to answering these questions, Dr. Richard Hartman, Chief Innovation Officer within the U.S. Air Force Office of Energy Assurance. Dr. Hartman is responsible for energy security initiatives for the Air and Space Force. As Chief Innovation Officer, he identifies and develops strategies to deploy innovative solutions to enhance energy resilience worldwide with global partners in academia, industry, and governments through partnerships to get energy resilience projects approved, solicited, and or built. Dr. Hartman has been one of the visionaries in the US government behind the push for natural hydrogen, and has established a plan for the future of this industry as it integrates into the daily lives of the citizens of America and the world. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Hartman.
Well, thank you guys. How are you guys doing? You don't mind if I have a little bit of coffee while I'm here? It's morning here, and I think it's afternoon over there in Spain, and then also in Denmark.
You're welcome. And I could say in Denmark, coffee is way too hot. We didn't take into account summer when building houses. So only have to do with water instead, with no aircon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No worries.
It's the same here, 37 degrees Celsius. That's close to 100 degrees over there Fahrenheit. And it's pretty hot, but I have my AC on, luckily. It's a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Hartman. And I want to start with the origins of this story. I think many people who are watching this, they're also going to be very curious about what you're about to tell us and what you're about to share. This might be one of the first interviews in natural hydrogen with you, and one of the first times you will be speaking with interviewers about this. So let's get started, right?
Well, I will say this will be my first podcast. So, but let me get along here and tell you how this really started. So really, it was into February 2023 when I came across an article in Science about geologic hydrogen in Mali, Africa. It referenced that there could be enough hydrogen underground to meet the global demand for thousands of years, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. But here's the thing. There was no mention of who is leading the work, no office, no point of contact, so I really couldn't pull the thread on that claim to see if it's true. If it would be real, it would be a game changer for not just the military, but also energy resilience. So I have a pretty extensive network, but it took me about a month until I finally tracked down the sole person in the entire United States government working on it, Dr. Jeffrey Ellis. And I'm certain people that are on this podcast know who he is. When Jeff and I finally connected, he introduced me also to another leader in the space, Dr. Doug Wicks from the Department of Energy, who I think was recently on your podcast. So for the listeners out there, I suggest you pull up that episode because Doug is an incredible speaker and extremely knowledgeable. Soon the three of us, we started talking. We turned this conversation into a small circle of interested stakeholders. So over the past 2 years, since, 2023 to now, that little group has grown into an international coalition. We have people from Japan. We have people from France. We have all over the world experts that are in governments, not just our governments, finance, industry, research, all working to share their insights and build a pathway for a deeper collaboration on what I think we believe will be the cornerstone of the next energy revolution, geologic hydrogen. So in fact, Morten, you're one of the early members as one of the first dedicated funds to support geologic hydrogen. So guys, thank you for having me on your podcast and being part of a group that I hopefully will bring positive change to the world.
Yeah, it is fantastic to see that these groups are forming, and we're seeing more and more people from different continents. Recently, I saw that Latin America, I have a Latin American background, which I may have said before on the podcast. I've seen that now Brazil, Colombia, they're getting involved, Uruguay. So it is very interesting to see that the US is leading the charge in natural hydrogen. I'm very excited to see where this takes us and where the three of us go in this industry. And Dr. Hartman, of course, you have a very impressive background. It's quite exciting to look at your LinkedIn account or your curriculum book. It's very interesting. And your headline of "He who dares wins" is a philosophy that I share. I think I think the same. It's a very entrepreneurial mindset and something very admirable. Now, based on this personal side of things, can you give us a quick introduction on your career and what led you to be involved in this development of energy, especially this part of energy in the U.S. Air Force?
Well, everyone sit in your chairs because this one's a crazy journey here. My journey is extremely unconventional. I actually started my career in the Air Force and aviation. Then I moved into the environmental and occupational health. Then I moved into healthcare. And strangely enough, I eventually found myself into energy. This unconventional path, though, gave me a broad perspective of how complex systems work and how to create solutions that last. As for who dares wins, that's the motto of the British SAS. I kind of adopted it as a reminder of that real progress, like you're saying, Anthony, in any mission comes from taking thoughtful and calculated risk. And you all as investors, that's probably another reason why, Anthony, you said you probably adopt similar mindset. So that mindset also has carried me through senior executive roles in the U.S. government at the Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, and Veterans Affairs. I also jumped into the private sector as entrepreneur, starting 2 technology companies that both went to successful exits. And also somewhere in between all that, I had the chance to teach at university, which gave me a deeper appreciation for how people learn and how to take complex ideas and make them clear and actionable. Now, in my current role as Chief Innovation Officer of the Air Force Office of Energy Assurance, my focus is on energy resilience. Did I say resilience? Resilience, you're going to hear that word a lot during this podcast. So what is that? That is making sure military operations at Air Force installations operate 24/7, 365 to meet our national security objectives. So that's a little bit about me. I could probably spend the whole podcast on my crazy journey, but I don't think your listeners want to listen to that. They want to hear about hydrogen and the potential opportunities to invest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hartman. And we have a lot of questions lined up, but first I want to say thank you for letting me know that, or everyone knows that the Science article actually got you started, because I remember seeing that article coming out thinking, finally, industry validation, now everything happens. And then beep, nothing happened, But of course, I'm an impatient investor and things take time. So luckily, I'm hearing more and more stories that, guys like you got inspired to start doing something in these bigger organizations that moves as they move. So I'm grateful that, it worked. Good things come out of Science magazine articles. I'm happy. But
well, it's a top peer-reviewed journal. So if it's either Science or Nature, then I think it gets attention. Just be grateful I actually read.
Exactly. I'm glad. It's just that, that was so needed at that point. When the industry was even more than today, it kind of, people didn't believe, is this real? And having a magazine of that magnitude, that was just great. But of course, another really validating thing for the industry is when bigger organizations are taking an interest. And so I'm really interested in knowing why the U.S. Armed Forces is taking an interest, and why so much an interest that you're actually spending time and resources, as the way I see it, to move this industry forward. Why is this? I'm guessing here that it'll be something with
Let me clarify time and resources. Time is, like I said, bringing people together and starting to change the narrative a little bit. But let me pull the thread a little bit more of that. So really for the U.S. Armed Forces, and especially the Air Force, geologic hydrogen could be a real game changer. And I sort of alluded to that for how we think about energy resilience and energy independence. This isn't just about adding another fuel to the mix. It's about creating a scalable, cost-effective, listen to this word, primary energy source that can keep our installations running no matter what's happening to the commercial grids. When people think about hydrogen, they think about it as a carrier, energy carrier. We need to change that narrative where it's a primary energy resource. So to move forward, our vision is pretty straightforward. Use the U.S. Geological Survey prospectivity data to locate the best spots. Next thing is to find and tap geologic hydrogen right on our installations or just outside of the fence line, and then leverage the existing oil and gas infrastructure, extract it. We're not talking about creating new technologies. We're talking about a boon for the majors. And that's the message I think is going to be important. But once it gets off the ground, we could use it, gets out of our ground, like I said, then we can use it locally and we can store it securely. So right now, we're working on an initiative to validate the USGS data at several installations to see if the geology and economics line up. So if they do, we could have a domestic, reliable energy resource that strengthens our readiness and reduces our dependence on a fragile, distant supply chains. But the biggest hurdle isn't tech, it's the policy. So the uncertainty over leasing rights, and this is specifically to the United States, and I believe it also pertains to other countries because geologic hydrogen really hasn't been defined. And we're starting to see a little movement there. But for us, not having an understanding basically would freeze evasive exploration on federal lands, U.S. federal lands. And that includes some of the most promising areas that USGS has identified. Now, that doesn't affect private lands in the United States, but federal lands. And remember, I'm a member of the federal government. But if we can clear that roadblock, the payoff for the military and the Air Force is huge. An energy resource that's domestic, dependable, ready to power operations anywhere, anytime, under any conditions. So maybe that gives your listeners sort of a hint about why we're a little interested in it.
Very well, thank you. And I think you touched on some of the politics that is honestly not a strong point of mine, but I agree that it means so much for the industry. But I'll get back to that later. You mentioned, the Air Force. Obviously, this is where you're working within the U.S. military. Do you think is it fair to say all branches of military are looking into finding more energy resilience, maybe looking at natural hydrogen, or is this a exclusive U.S. Air Force project?
Yeah, Maura, that's a fair question. I'd say the Air Force has been the most public and deliberate in exploring geologic hydrogen so far, mainly because our energy-intensive operations and the need for resilient on-base power. But the interest isn't limited to us, and you know that being on some of our calls, you're seeing representation from the Army and from the Department of Defense. Other branches are watching closely, and they're starting to see the potential too, because energy resilience is a shared priority across the entire Department of Defense. Remember, I've said that word probably resilience probably at least 20 times already, so you'll probably hear at least 50 more. I believe, though, that geologic hydrogen could fit into that picture in different ways, whether it's forward deployed bases, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, backup power, or even integration to microgrids. So while the Air Force is leading the early effort, I think it's safe to say there's a broader curiosity and potential adoption across the Department of Defense.
Interesting. Yeah. And yeah, obviously, with Brazilians, everyone should be happy about that, looking forward. But since you're in the lead here of activities from the Air Force, can you deep dive a bit on what have you set in motion already? What kind of engagement or work have you been doing with the industry so far?
Yeah, let me tell you what we've done so far. So last year, we put out a request for information, RFI, for geologic hydrogen, and the results gave us a clear snapshot of where the industry stands right now. One of the biggest drivers behind the RFI was for us to figure out how the Air Force could help identify, extract, and use geologic hydrogen in ways that moves the whole industry forward. The response we got really confirmed our hunch that running a complete A to Z pilot project from exploration to extraction to end use wouldn't just help us. It could be the tipping point for the industry, the larger industry, with the military leading the charge. So overall, I think we received about 30 formal responses, and they came from all over. Companies doing advanced data analytics, firms that handle full extraction and processing, academic institutions, state geologic surveys, even financiers like you and your audience, looking at how to fund these kinds of projects. Our plan right now is to mass that data, to protect proprietary information, and then compile it. So eventually we can put out a request for proposal that would lead to a potential long-term energy contract.
Well, that's really good, and thank you for setting something like that in motion. And I know some of what you've been doing also touches on the policies on federal land and stuff that we could get back to. But you said earlier, that some of it might be basically energy for your bases or something. Could you imagine that this IFI devolves into something further down the line? You put something else out where you might be drilling, to supply bases or try to supply them.
Yeah, I alluded to right now, I think earlier, that invasive, exploration on federal lands is going to be complex right now. There's some legislative issues associated. So how are we going to move forward? Well, listen to our strategy. Right now, we'd like to start with non-invasive exploration at the Air Force bases, using advanced sensing technologies to figure out where the geologic hydrogen exists without disturbing the environment. Now, this is going to be mainly for reservoirs and not for stimulation type of activity. So we're not looking for rock, we're seeing where that is. But the goal is to turn, if it exists, into here it is. And we can plan around that. So once we know the resources are there, the next step could be targeted, controlled exploration, maybe even drilling in specific sites. It's going to take some time. The point isn't just to prove it exists, it's showing it can be produced, used reliably, right on or near our installations. From there, it's really about integration and that magic word, resilience. Building systems, microgrids, and storage that could use primary energy resource to strengthen our mission readiness. Ultimately, the hope really is to create a fully operational, scalable geologic hydrogen capability that strengthens both the Air Force operations and a broader national security for years to come.
Thank you very much. Makes great sense. Yeah.
Right, I have one of my own questions, because based on the energy resilience that we're looking to achieve here in the US, we have been talking now on this podcast about natural hydrogen quite a bit, as you've noticed. It is basically what we talk about. But there's also other types of hydrogen that the US Armed Forces might have been in contact with. So taking a look aside from natural hydrogen, usage of other types of hydrogen, what has the work been in these types of verticals?
Yeah, I think what you see, and I think people reference to these crazy colors of hydrogen, and I think I've even heard Morton say something to nature, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, Morton, is that it's not about the colors, it's about energy density there. And if you want to pull a thread out real quick, and then I'll tie into the question here, but I think...
Right. It's it's a carbon intensity. That's
Yeah.
the word, and there's an episode out there where Anthony and I have a nice discussion with good manners. I really don't like the colors, and Anthony seems that it maybe it's a good way to differentiate between them. But I think it should all be carbon intensity, but I understand that may be a bit too technical in daily use. But
So with that said, the new kid on the block is geologic hydrogen, but the Air Force and DoD have been really researching capabilities for hydrogen for years. We're not talking just about production, we're talking holistically. That is planning for the integration, running demos, preparing policy to adopt it seamlessly when the time comes. For example, we've mapped hydrogen-ready infrastructure. We've identified 11 geothermal energy companies recently that could create hydrogen with excess energy capacity for production. Plus, we've identified 5 generator manufacturers whose systems can already run on hydrogen or hydrogen blends. So you're seeing there, we're talking about the ability to have the generation that's there if geologic hydrogen really works, and that's production. And then you have to have off-takers like us. We still need to be able to store and transport it. And we're looking into those things. Policy is key too. And we think the administration's interests. And so when I speak about the administration, this is, President Trump's administration. We all, for those, I know you have international listeners, but we have a boss in the government, and that's the President of the United States, and we lean towards their policies. So, but we believe that the administration's interest in hydrogen is growing, and executive action could be coming soon. So fingers crossed there. And this is just about the U.S. So in the Indo-Pacific, you're probably where the Philippines have opened up the door to hydrogen exploration and creating one of the most transparent permitting systems in the region. For us, that means forward deployed, affordable energy, stronger regional security, and a strategic counterweight to adversaries, all in line with our Pacific Deterrence Initiative. Bottom line, we're not waiting for geologic hydrogen to be proven. We're building the infrastructure, the partnerships, and the policy now, so when it's ready, we can integrate it fast, effectively, and at scale.
Excellent.
That's just so encouraging to hear that you're putting your mind to this from a different angle that some might be looking into hydrogen. The resilience angle, energy security. I think we'll get back to the Philippines. The international work. Now it's about time to dive into what frightens me. The policies. What can be done, because in Italy, what I love about the U.S. and natural hydrogen, and this is partly the reason why I have a map behind me, is mineral rights are owned by landowners, and you can actually then get going. In Europe, you can get a license somewhere, but it will take, between forever and eternity to get one. But then, of course, U.S., you have federal land. You touched on it already. So that's an area with policies. There are other policies. And I'm just so happy that I know from our meetings, the many meetings we have, that you are working on this. But could you elaborate a bit on, some of the recent government policies that might affect, what I'll call our industry and the Army?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I still got to pull the thread on there. I literally thought, Morton, you were in a library because you had the map of the U.S. And if you go to a U.S. Library, they usually have a map and you have books behind there. So I wasn't sure. I was going to ask you before the episode and say, are you at a U.S. library, because you look like you're at one? So hey, so
smoke
get to your question there.
Look clever. I'm trying to look clever, but smoke and mirrors.
Well, it worked on me. Hey, so the new administration has really put energy dominance at the forefront of its policy initiatives. In fact, when the president was inaugurated on January 20th, the first two executive orders that he signed on January 20th really matter for the potential geologic hydrogen. Now, they don't exclusively talk about it, but I'll get into it. So one of the executive orders was, and for your listeners, I suggest that you get your pencil out and write these things down. Executive Order 14154. And I believe it's titled Unleashing American Energy. Basically what it says is that every state and U.S. territory needs a reliable energy supply because national security depends on it. That's perfect fit for geologic hydrogen. It's homegrown, it could be cost effective, and it shields us from global supply chains. The other one that came out, and it was two after, is Executive Order 14156. And that's when the president declared a national energy emergency. So it's just a blunt reminder that you can't have a strong military without strong energy base. For the Air Force, that's the green light for us to push advanced tech, including hydrogen, hard and fast. To meet these EOs, we can't do it alone. So we're leaning into third-party ownership so industry can bring their best solutions forward. If you can help make sure our airmen and our guardians, so for your audience too, I think Anthony said that the Office of Energy Assurance is with the Air Force, but we also oversee the Space Force, all U.S. Air Force reserve bases, and select guard bases. So the office that we're in has a broad oversight. So guardians are the Space Force military members, for your audience that are there. Just, this is not, what's that Marvel showed, Galaxy of the Guardians or something like that? I don't know.
It's
but
not that.
if we can do, What's that?
No, I'm just saying. Thank you for making that clear. I just thought Guardians of the Galaxy runs on hydrogen. That'll be great. We'll do that in another.
I'm sure they probably have some kind of weird device there. But if we can have that energy where we need it, we want you in the fight. So if we map out our reserves, we build the tech. By the way, the tech's already there. There's a lot of building, some slight modifications to it, and scale it quickly. The U.S. and the Air Force can lead the way in geologic hydrogen. But if we hesitate, we're risking letting our competitors and adversaries take the lead. So these executive orders give us both the mandate and the momentum.
That makes perfect sense. It's great to see how the administration's focus on energy also fits well within what natural hydrogen or geologic hydrogen has of potential. You've been obviously talking a lot about what you're doing in the US, but also touched on the fact that you have bases around the world. Are there anything of what you're doing right now or what you might be doing in the future that would include hydrogen, natural geologic hydrogen developments in foreign countries, I guess, near your bases or something like that?
Yeah, so Morten, we have been speaking, I think, in the podcast so far mostly about domestic opportunities, but the Air Force does operate globally. We have about 180 locations where we have a presence. Some presence is a small presence, some of it's a large presence. And that really means there's a real potential work with geologic hydrogen industry overseas as well. So I think I mentioned earlier about the Philippines, where they've reformed their permitting policy and their processes, which makes them really one of the most forward-leaning countries in the Indo-Pacific. For us, that really could mean forward deployed low energy right where we operate, boosting the resilience that we need, remember that magic word, for both the U.S. and allied forces in the region. But it's not just about the Indo-Pacific. Some of our European bases could also benefit if the deposits are confirmed there. Now, we probably already know, and people that are on your podcast have read, that France has done some things. Now, unfortunately, we do not have a military presence there, but we have them in Turkey, we have them in Italy, we have them in Germany, we have the UK, just to mention a few. So yes, our priority is proving the concept here in the US first, because those policies really affect domestic production. But we're already thinking about how to take those lessons global.
That's very interesting, and again, the size of your organization, you can bring it to the world. That's really great. My final question would be, respecting that our audience is a mix of many different people, many with an investment interest, but also we are very much at this stage industry podcast. So very likely there'll be a few exploration companies listening, or someone who might want to be a hydrogen explorer at some point. So just because we have you here, what would you expect from a natural hydrogen company that wants to work with the U.S. Air Force, and is it even possible? And how could they pursue some kind of collaboration down the road in the future?
I think I leaned on that a little bit about the RFI, but you're right. I mean, and I also stated earlier on, we can't do this alone. So we're going to be leaning on industry. And in fact, to the point where I also said earlier that our focus is on not owning and operating the operations. It's for industry to come in to do that. And there's significant financial, reasons for them to do that. So let me just sort of tell you, I think, what we're looking for. So from geologic hydrogen companies, it's simple: a mix of compatibility, vision, and the ability to meet our current and emerging energy resilience needs. Again, there's that magic word. If you've got something compelling, exploration tech, production capacity, storage, or even creative financing models, we're interested. So your listeners may be asking the question, why do I want to work with the U.S. government? And why do I want to work with the military? Well, one advantage we bring is we've got the highest credit rating you can get. So when we commit, we follow through. And we have land, a lot of it. So not just anywhere, but secure U.S. and overseas sites where production can sit right next to or where the energy is being used. So like our geothermal energy projects, we can structure a follow-on contract like a power purchase agreement that gives companies a clear path from a demo to production. That's not just about supplying, the Air Force. It's about building bankable, scalable model that draws more investment. And we value partners who want to help build a lasting ecosystem for geologic hydrogen as part of the American energy security. So if you can help us prove it, scale it, and meet the high standards of our military demand, there's a big opportunity, not just one site or one project, but potentially as multiple bases, regions in the years ahead.
Right. So, and to me, there has to be a follow-up to this question, to Morton's question, and to your answer, which is many of these companies, when they get involved with the U.S. Army or the U.S. Air Force, they will want to have the robustness of knowing they will have time to be able to develop their projects. So do you think there may be, in the long run, because this must be known, a sort of deadline in the interest from the Air Force in these projects? And also additionally, what timeline do you envision for this type of initiative to take place?
Yeah. Well, this will be reassuring to your audience. There's no hard deadline for the Air Force work in geologic hydrogen, but there is urgency. Energy resilience isn't someday problem for us. It's a right now problem. So we've got to look at every viable option. And geologic hydrogen, I believe, is one of the most promising. But for this to really take off, three things have to line up, from my opinion: legislative clarity, funding, and adoption. So let me talk about legislative clarity to start off with. Right now, there's, in the U.S., I can only speak for the U.S., there's no clear, how geologic hydrogen fits into the federal leasing laws. Until that's fixed, large-scale exploration of federal lands is going to be slow. The right legislation could change that almost overnight. Second, funding. If Congress, the White House, or the Department of Defense make this a priority, we can move from concept to operation in a fraction of the time it's going to take for exotic energy solutions like nuclear and scalable geothermal. Lastly, on an adoption side, the Air Force needs to be ready to integrate hydrogen into its operations. And industry and tech have to have the capacity to deliver at scale. So one of the fastest accelerators, what would that be? Proving the resource exists where we operate. If non-invasive prospecting confirms hydrogen on or near our bases, the conversation shifts from if to where and when. And that's when investment innovation really take off. So bottom line, or what we say in the military, bottom line up front, if clarity, funding, and adoption come together, we could see serious momentum, yes, in a few years and even earlier, because we're not talking about new technologies.
It's very promising. And that's, I think, a response that most people, they want to listen when they're checking out our podcast. Okay, so I'd like to conclude with a very speculative question, which is more directed at you, Dr. Hartman. We know that this space and this podcast is not only being watched by investors, of course, it's being watched by governments, being watched by geologists and students all around the world who are making decisions on where to go next in their careers. Developing this industry and becoming somebody who is leading in this industry, how optimistic are you in the future of natural hydrogen?
I'd say I'm both optimistic and pragmatic. On one hand, geologic hydrogen is still an emerging field. So that gives a lot of opportunity, like you said, for students and things of that nature and industries and startups. But there are real hurdles that need to be addressed before it can scale. On the other hand, I've been around enough transformational technologies to recognize when the ingredients for a major shift are starting to align. And I see it happening here. Just for example, I could mention, in just the past couple of years, we've gone from a handful of people talking about this to an international network of scientists, policymakers, investors, and operators actively exploring its potential. So we're seeing real interest from industry, growing awareness in the government, and even signals from our administration. From a military perspective, the promise is really hard for us to ignore. If we can confirm geologic hydrogen resources on or near our bases, whether here in the U.S. or overseas, that changes the equation. So my optimism comes from seeing momentum build in multiple lanes at once. The science is advancing, industry capabilities growing, the policy conversation is starting to catch up. The pragmatic side of me knows it's going to take legislative reform, investment, and operational proof to fully unlock it. But if those pieces come together, I believe they can. We could be looking at a new globally relevant primary energy resource that will revolutionize the energy industry in just a few years and for years to come.
Well said.
That sounds very optimistic, and I'm very grateful for the response. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Hartman. We are very happy to have you here. We're very happy that you're sharing all of this information so openly. It is often quite difficult to get information from any government at this level. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys. I enjoy your podcast. I'm learning, believe it or not, from your experts and your conversations. So keep it going, keep it rocking, I would say, and look forward to seeing Morton in France, I think in November. So if we want to put a plug in for, was it Natural Hydrogen 25 in Paris?
Yeah. Anthony will be there too, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I will be there.
All right. We'll see you guys in Europe.
See you there, and see everybody else who is planning to go. And as Dr. Hartman said about rock on and go to our website, nath2investing.com. I'm getting real good at these ads, aren't I? You will find our Investor Report 2025 there. You can sign up also for our bi-weekly newsletter, where you will get plenty of updates and news and interviews. Also, you can check out our Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, where you might be watching this now. Subscribe, leave us a like, share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues who probably enjoy it too. That's all for this week, and see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Dr. Hartman. Thank you, Morton.